True allegiance is nothing more than a ghost story until it faces the fire. The vast majority of individuals drift through their existence assuming fidelity is present simply because it hasn't been challenged. They mistake shared meals, empty compliments, and the passage of time for a blood oath. But Niccolò Machiavelli would find such naivety laughable, perhaps even dangerous. The master strategist understood the harsh reality. In the unforgiving landscape of power dynamics, fidelity is not a declaration you make. It is a revelation you force into the light. Consequently, the only method to distinguish the authentic from the parasitic is to audit your circle without notice. It requires cold, calculated, and sometimes ruthless pressure to see what remains. You must internalize this uncomfortable fact: most associates are not devoted to you as a person. They are devoted to the utility you provide your influence, your resources, and the warmth of the spotlight you cast. The second that utility evaporates, their presence vanishes along with it, leaving you exposed and alone. Machiavelli understood that peace breeds pretenders. True colors only bleed through when the ship is sinking, and there is a tangible cost to staying aboard. This necessitates the creation of artificial friction, strategic disruptions, designed not to harm, but to unmask. You cannot simply ask for loyalty. You must exact a price for it to see who pays. That is the moment the facade cracks. The first strategy is the Deprivation Test. Systematically remove your validation and observe the fallout. Cease the constant affirmations. Cut off the supply of attention they have grown accustomed to and let them sit in the cold for a calculated period. Observe the shift. If they react with resentment, icy detachment, or immediately seek validation from your rivals, they were never truly in your corner. They were never addicted to your character. They were addicted to the dopamine hit you provided. That is not loyalty. That is a transaction. This is pure ego dependency. Machiavelli noted that such people only love the version of themselves reflected in your admiration, not the person standing before them. Genuine Confederates remain steadfast when the theater goes dark. They possess their own internal value and do not feed off yours to feel significant. When you pull back, real loyalty investigates the silence. It holds the line. The parasites, however, simply detach to find a new host to orbit. They seek someone currently useful to their immediate needs. Do not mourn the loss of a leech. Celebrate the clarity of the reveal. Now prepare for the second mechanism. Inject volatility into the dynamic. Announce a dangerous shift in your trajectory, a gamble that signals a major departure from the safety of the status quo. Scrutinize their immediate reflex. Do they offer a sword to fight beside you, or do they shrink back with veiled skepticism and sudden caution? As the philosophy goes, an ally fuels your ambition, while a saboteur dresses up their own cowardice as prudent advice. This test works because your evolution threatens their mediocrity. If your ascent leaves them behind, their insecurity transforms into a subtle anchor. A true compatriot evolves in tandem with you, whereas a pretender attempts to shackle you to the past where they felt dominant and safe. The sabotage is rarely overt. It comes wrapped in faux concern, utilizing phrases like, "I am just looking out for your safety. Are you sure this is wise?" They question your judgment, but the subtext screams, "Do not dare become something I cannot control or recognize." In this instance, you must operate with surgical detachment. Remain mute. Allow them to fill the void with their anxieties. The more they babble, the more they expose whether they are guarding your future or merely protecting their comfortable spot in your shadow. The third audit is the vacuum. Initiate total radio silence. This is not a petty game, but a strategic filter to see who steps into the breach and who fades away. Machiavelli would argue that the silence of your court reveals who truly serves the crown versus who merely attends the banquet for the free wine. Those who only materialize during your victories when you're broadcasting success and entertaining the masses are merely an audience, not an army. Authentic devotion pays attention to the rhythm of your absence. It does not require a show to know you are there. It reaches out in the quiet moments. It manifests as a check-in on your well-being, saying, "You have been quiet. Is everything all right?" rather than a narcissistic demand for your reply. Shattering these illusions is painful because we crave the lie of mutual care, but walking blindly through a minefield of fake friends is fatal. History teaches us that empires rarely fall from external sieges. They rot from the betrayal festering within the walls, hidden in plain sight. You must govern your life with the strictness of a sovereign state. A smile at the drawbridge does not grant access to the throne room. The fourth maneuver is the feint of vulnerability. Deliberately display a chink in your armor and let them perceive you as weak. It need not be a tragedy, simply a moment where your omnipotence fades and you appear human, confused, or in need of assistance. Monitor the dynamic closely. This is the crucible where allegiance is either forged in steel or shattered like cheap glass. Many are sycophants to your power, not your person. The instant they perceive a fracture in the pedestal, they recoil in disgust. They retreat not out of respect, but because your fallibility terrifies them. They were never holding you up. They were leaning on you. You were simply the ladder they climbed. If a rung breaks, they do not fix it. They jump to the next sturdy structure without looking back. As the strategist notes, only the one who remains while the walls tremble earns the right to feast when the fortress is restored. Finally, we arrive at the fifth and most ruthless assessment, the opportunity cost. Present them with a chance to gain by betraying you. Create a scenario where they stand to gain by compromising you, a subtle, believable temptation where self-interest outweighs loyalty. Scrutinize the outcome with the eye of a hawk. Do they alert you to the breach? Do they conceal the knife? Or do they rationalize the stab in the back after the fact? Or do they approach you immediately with transparency and honor? This audit goes beyond loyalty. It maps the topography of their soul. Words can be fabricated, but values cannot. Be prepared, for the majority will fail these exams. In 2026, few are architected for the burden of real loyalty. Modern relationships are often engineered for swift exchanges, superficial ease, and the careful curation of image. They are social currency, not bonds. But Niccolò Machiavelli held a profound disdain for such shallow theatrics. He wasn't seduced by the facade. His obsession was singular, the cold, hard reality of the result. When you apply these strategic pressure tests to your circle, you aren't looking for comfort. You are hunting for absolute clarity, the kind of truth that cuts through the noise. You must be prepared for the inevitable. The herd will thin. You will lose acquaintances, hangers-on, and fair-weather allies. Yet in exchange for that loss, you acquire something far more valuable: silence, tranquility, and a loyalty forged in the crucible of adversity rather than merely spoken over a dinner table. You do not require a legion to conquer your world. A sprawling network of dozens is often a liability, a drain on your resources and attention. The strategic mind understands the power of scarcity. You require perhaps 3 trusted lieutenants, maybe 2, or even just one single, unshakable ally. I am talking about the individual who remains steadfast when the coffers are empty and the accolades have vanished. The one who maintains faith in your vision when there is zero tangible proof of success, and who defends your reputation fiercely when you are miles away. But understand this: you will never identify this person through observation alone. You must subject them to the fire. The vast majority of humanity wanders through life encased in a fog of illusions, surrounded by phantoms. They are encircled by sycophants who nod agreeably at every sentence, chuckle at every mediocre joke, yet vanish into the ether the moment true suffering arrives at the doorstep. Society in its naivety labels these fragile connections friendship. They pat themselves on the back and call it loyalty. It is a delusion. Machiavelli, however, would strip away the sentiment and name it accurately camouflage. It is nothing more than a soft, theatrical performance of affection designed to conceal a brutal battlefield where the only rule is quiet, ruthless self-interest. Unless you possess the courage to step back and rigorously audit these figures in your life, you're constructing your empire on a foundation of shifting sand. You're placing your faith in an allegiance that is entirely fictitious, and worse, you're revealing your grandest strategies to opportunistic predators who are simply biding their time to weaponize them against you. Do not mistake the act of testing someone for cruelty. It is the ultimate act of responsibility and self-preservation. You're not manufacturing betrayal where none existed. You're simply pulling back the curtain to reveal the treachery that was already rotting the floorboards. That distinction is the cornerstone of power. Be warned, the parasites will sense the shift. They will attempt to manipulate you with guilt, claiming you have changed, that you have grown cold, accusing you of harboring mistrust without cause. And they are absolutely correct. You do not trust them. Nor should you not until that trust has been bought and paid for with action. Not until they have survived what the Machiavellian mind would categorize as the mandatory trials of allegiance. Trust is not a cheap commodity to be distributed like candy to every passerby. It is a fortress. You must compel them to lay siege to it, to fight for entry not with flowery speeches, but with the brutal, boring repetition of consistency over time. However, prepare yourself for a deeply unsettling phenomenon occurs the moment you begin to deploy these psychological audits. The masks you believed were solid flesh will begin to dissolve before your eyes. The warmth in their tone will curdle into irritation. Suddenly, they will start interrogating your motives. Why does this reaction occur? It happens because when an individual profits from your blindness, your sudden awakening is perceived as an existential threat. They can sense the vibration, the subtle shift in your demeanor, the newfound precision in your words, and the calculated withdrawal of your energy. If they harbor hidden agendas, do not expect a confession. They will not admit to their parasitic nature. Instead, they will instinctively retaliate. This retaliation will rarely be overt violence. It will be a campaign of subtle sabotage and undermining. That reaction is your confirmation the test has succeeded. But realize this: a false friend is not always a malicious viper lying in wait. Frequently, they are simply weak. They lack the structural integrity to withstand pressure crumbling the moment the burden becomes heavy. They are weather vanes spinning wildly to face whichever direction the prevailing winds of popularity blow. They require you to remain a static, convenient caricature of yourself that serves their emotional needs. The second you evolve, expand, or calcify your resolve, they will begin their retreat into the shadows. As Machiavelli might observe, the weak will perpetually confuse necessary strength with unnecessary cruelty. This implies a critical juncture where the majority of aspiring strategists falter. They execute the test perfectly. They stare the ugly truth in the face. Yet they remain paralyzed, anchored by nostalgia, paralyzed by the fear of solitude, and haunted by that ancient, debilitating doubt. But what if I am mistaken? Let me assure you, you are not. When your intuition screams, when your stomach knots in their presence, when your vitality bleeds out of you simply by being near them, or when you feel the urge to conceal your triumphs to avoid their envy, you already possess the verdict. By lingering, you are not saving the relationship. You're merely postponing the inevitable consequences and allowing the damage to compound. Machiavelli had zero interest in the comfort of illusions. His sole currency was control. And true dominion over one's fate requires absolute, unblemished clarity. You cannot afford the luxury of guessing where a person's loyalty lies, not if you're constructing a legacy, not if you're ascending the hierarchy of power, and certainly not if your voice holds weight and influence in the world. In the year 2026, your time is a finite resource, and your silence is a weapon. You must have absolute certainty regarding who stands at your shoulder. You cannot rely on imagination, you cannot depend on hope, and you must never ever assume. No. And here lies the beautiful paradox of this philosophy. Once you commit to this mode of existence, living strategically, observing acutely, and cutting ruthlessly, the genuine allies will reveal themselves with equal clarity. The process is not solely about unearthing betrayal. The silence you create acts as a spotlight, illuminating the loyal just as sharply as it exposes the traitor. When you pull back your support and someone instinctively steps forward, not to take from you, but to steady you, that is authenticity. That is not a performance for an audience. That is pure, unadulterated alignment of purpose. Such a phenomenon is rare, occurring perhaps once in a lifetime. When you discover it, you must guard it as you would the rarest gold. You will eventually come to the profound realization that a single loyal confidant is worth infinitely more than 100 convenient acquaintances. Simultaneously, you will understand a fundamental truth. Genuine loyalty is never loud. It has no need to broadcast its existence or demand attention. True allegiance is quiet. It is consistent. It is a calm, steady force that requires no verbal proof because it is constructed entirely on the bedrock of unwavering presence. When another human being is unequivocally in your corner, you feel it in your marrow. Not only when you are victorious and the champagne is flowing, but when you are riddled with doubt, when you are silent, and when you are distant. They do not evaporate into the mist. They remain. They may not always be perfect, and they may not always be vocal, but they endure. The elegance of Machiavellian testing lies in its subtlety. It requires zero confrontation. There is no need for shouting matches or dramatic arguments. It is simply a matter of analyzing patterns, employing silence, executing strategic withdrawal, providing opportunity, and maintaining cold observation. You simply create the vacuum and allow others to show you exactly who they are. Allow their loyalty, or the profound absence of it, to scream louder than any promise they could ever whisper. The majority of people are terrified of this method. They do not want to know the truth. They would prefer to exist in a comforting illusion than to endure the pain of severing a tie. But remember, every single day you permit a disloyal element to remain in your orbit, you are not protecting them. You are actively betraying yourself. Your circle of loyalty is a fortress, and every false friend you allow within those walls represents a fatal structural crack in your foundation. You do not repair a crack in a fortress with a coat of paint. You fix it by ruthlessly tearing out the weak material and rebuilding the breach with impenetrable stone. So commence your audit quietly and with surgical precision. Pull your energy away. Hold your space. Make calculated moves that introduce friction into the dynamic. You do this not because you desire to destroy the relationship, but because you must stress test the glue that holds it together. The bonds worthy of your time will harden under the pressure. The parasitic ones will disintegrate. And when they fall away, you must let them go without hesitation. Offer no explanations. Offer no apologies. Offer only silence. For in the game of power, that silence is not emptiness, it is your crown. Own the outcome. March on. There is an eerie, almost unsettling tranquility that descends once the parasites are purged from your existence. It doesn't hit you the second they're gone, though. In the beginning, there is a phantom limb sensation, a hollow ache where they used to stand. But do not mistake that vacuum for nothingness. What you are actually feeling is absolute clarity. That void is the architecture of reality being built. It is room for assets that actually reinforce your position. As Machiavelli understood all too well, dominion cannot flourish in a suffocating mob. True authority demands a sterile environment to take root. When you excise a counterfeit ally, you're not engaging in subtraction. You're performing a necessary act of purification. You aren't cutting off your support system. You are eliminating static. Understand this: when allegiance is feigned, the person standing next to you isn't just a neutral body taking up space. They are an active, corrosive agent. Every word they utter introduces a microfracture in your focus. Every agreeable nod acts as a sedative, dulling the razor-sharp instinct you need to survive. Their manufactured smiles condition you to pause, and in the game of power, a split-second pause is a fatality. This applies beyond the battlefield. It is the death knell for your ambition, your life's trajectory, and your grand strategy. This is precisely why you must implement stress tests. You do not do it for the sadistic thrill of the game. You do it because you are the guardian of non-renewable resources, your mental energy, your finite time, and your enduring legacy. Recognize that anyone not fully integrated into your mission is subconsciously dismantling it. It may not even be malicious intent, but their inherent fragility is on a collision course with your fortitude. When that impact occurs, they will inevitably fold or stick a knife in your back. Therefore, auditing your circle becomes a standard operating procedure, not a one-time event, but a recurring ritual. Allegiance is not a diploma granted once for a lifetime. It is a perishable good. You must inspect it constantly, like a perimeter guard, checking the locks every single night. Machiavelli's true nightmare was not the armies of foreign lands. His deepest fear was the silent, creeping ambition festering within his own council. The annals of history validate this paranoia. Time and again, great dynasties were not toppled by battering rams, but by the slow, undetected rot spreading from the core. Confidants morphed into competitors. Sworn brothers became assassins. And why? Because the leadership failed to detect the subtle temperature drop in the room. Or, in a more tragic turn, they saw the signs and chose denial. That stops with you. You're no longer a passive observer. You're the grandmaster moving the pieces. When you verbally project doubt, you're actually scanning for micro-expressions. When you withdraw your presence, you're keeping a tally of who pursues the mission and who drifts into the shadows. When you show a calculated crack in the armor, you are probing for predators. When you leave a door open that allows them to profit by hurting you, you are measuring the tensile strength of their honor. Throughout this entire vivisection of their character, you remain an impenetrable void, silent, composed, and absolutely surgical. That very silence is your greatest weapon. If you level an accusation, you give them a platform to fabricate a narrative, to spin the facts, and to mount a defense. But when you suspend judgment and simply observe, truth floats to the surface. Human beings are most authentic when they believe the camera is off and the master is away. Transform yourself into the one-way mirror they forget is there. Become the vacuum that absorbs their whispers, and never, under any circumstances, reveal the methodology of your audit. The moment they know they are being graded, the data is contaminated. Now, this is the trap where the average mind gets snared. They mistake loyalty for mere politeness or face-to-face kindness. True allegiance is far more complex. It is defined by how they handle the weight of your reputation when you're not in the room to enforce it. It is about their tone when surrounded by your detractors. It is about their posture when the hierarchy shakes. Devotion is only proven when you lack the title, the leverage, or the immediate ability to reward them. So, if intuition signals a breach, remove yourself from the equation. Vanish completely and wait for the turbulence to subside. Observe who remains at your post when the transactional value hits zero. Adopting this perspective is uncommon because the masses are addicted to validation. They are desperate to be part of the herd. But the Florentine strategist did not pen his treatises for the needy. He wrote for the sovereigns, the conquerors, and the dominant. Supremacy is not measured by the size of your entourage, but by the extent of your control. The tighter your gatekeeping, the more formidable you become to the outside world. Your inner circle transforms from a gathering into a fortress. It becomes a structure of allegiance built by architectural design, not by the accidents of geography or history. The shift in atmosphere is palpable. Genuine fidelity has a distinct kinetic energy. It does not clamor for the spotlight or beg for applause. It requires no constant nourishment of praise. It runs silently in the background, standing sentry while you sleep. And crucially, it does not fracture when the lights go out and the pressure mounts. Adversity acts as a binding agent, making it harder. When you voice your struggles true, allies do not recoil or check their watches. They lean into the fire with you. Finding this caliber of dedication is statistically improbable, but its value is incalculable. When you locate just one individual who shields your back without waiting for a command, someone who intercepts the arrow before you even see the bowman, you unlock a profound psychological realization. You do not require a legion to feel secure. You simply need one authentic operator in your corner. Yet the most elegant aspect of this audit is the recoil. Once you begin rigorously testing those around you, you inevitably turn the microscope on your own soul. You are forced to interrogate your own reflection. Do I hold the line when no one is watching? Do I shield those who rely on me? Or do I vanish when the burden becomes heavy? That question is a scalpel to the ego. Authentic power is not merely about demanding fealty from subordinates. It is about becoming the living embodiment of that virtue. It means becoming the rock that others can anchor to even when they are blind to your actions. This is the bedrock upon which thousand-year empires are constructed. The audit does not conclude with the exposure of traitors. It evolves into a mirror. When you have stared into the face of treason, when you have felt the chill of abandonment from those who fled, when you have witnessed the structure of trust collapse under the sheer weight of selfish convenience, you begin to whet your own blade. You sharpen your standards not only for the world, but for the man in the mirror. Machiavelli posited that a sovereign must command both fear and respect. Yet surpassing even these, he must command absolute trust from the praetorian few who actually hold the keys. That caliber of trust is forged only in the fires of consistency and ironclad discipline. It comes from never blinking in the face of betrayal, even when the traitor you catch is yourself. Because here is the brutal truth about power. If you require absolute allegiance from others, you must be prepared to bring that same intensity to the table. It is not a cheap commodity given freely to the masses. It is a fierce, blood oath exchange reserved for the elite few who have proven they deserve a seat at your table. You become the vault for their darkest truths, protecting their reputation with a silence so heavy it feels like a physical weight. You guard their vulnerabilities and secrets with the same lethal dedication you would use to guard a loaded weapon, ensuring nothing slips out. Standing by them isn't for the sunny days when victory is inevitable. It is for the storms, the moments when association costs you social capital or money. This is the ultimate evolution. The great strategists spoke of transcending the desire to rule over subjects to achieving the mastery of ruling oneself. However, let us not confuse loyalty with enabling incompetence. Offering your fidelity does not mean you turn a blind eye to fragility or lack of discipline. It does not mean acting as a shield for someone who has repeatedly failed the audits of character you've put in place. It means that when you finally discover that rare individual, the one who navigates every psychological trap you set without stumbling, the one who survives the glare of the spotlight, the calculated withdrawal of your attention, the pressure of uncertainty, and the deafening weight of your strategic silence, the one who sees your exposed vulnerability and refuses to exploit it, who rejects the seductive whisper of betrayal that person graduates. They are no longer just in your circle. They are woven into your core. That core is holy ground. Once you have established that inner sanctum, the physics of your life shift entirely. Your mental focus creates a laser-like intensity, and your ability to execute plans becomes razor-sharp. You cease the exhausting habit of justifying your existence or your decisions. The paranoia of constantly checking your blind spots vanishes because for the first time, you have a second pair of eyes watching the shadows behind you. You possess an ally who offers more than empty applause when you succeed. They proactively secure the perimeter around you, neutralizing distractions, so you can continue your winning streak without interruption. This is someone who has buried their jealousy, someone who isn't secretly competing with you while wearing a mask of support. They do not view your stumbling blocks as a ladder for their own ascent. The vast majority of the population will go to their graves never knowing this level of bond because they are paralyzed by the terror of auditing their friends. They are petrified of the isolation that might follow. They dread what they might discover if they look too closely. But that fear is the very anchor dragging them down, keeping them weak, surrounded by bodies, but devoid of backup. They are drowned in cheers, but starve for protection. They are liked by many, yet respected by none. As the principles of high-level strategy remind us in 2026, respect is a far more valuable currency than affection in the arena of power. So when you start the surgical process of cutting ties, isolating threats, and refining your circle, you're not turning cold. You are becoming efficient. You are becoming exact. Do not mistake precision for cruelty. In this game, it is the only mechanism for survival. Those who label this necessary filtering as mean were never architected for command. They were designed by nature to be subordinates, to depend on the strength of others, to cling to the hull of the ship rather than steer it. That is not your designated role. You exist to set the direction, to dominate the landscape, to analyze the battlefield, and predict the enemy's formation before they even lace up their boots. And the only way to achieve that is by stress testing every potential liability before it detonates. Do not just watch the loud antagonists. Watch the quiet ones. Pay close attention to the ones whose smiles don't reach their eyes, or the ones who agree with your every word too effortlessly. Be wary of the fixtures, the people who are always physically present but offer zero intellectual or emotional depth. Put them through the gauntlet. Observe their micro-expressions. And when they inevitably fail, offer no closing arguments. Do not attempt to rehabilitate them. Just sever the connection. There is a profound, almost mystical power in realizing that the tiny group remaining standing has been forged in the fire of your scrutiny. They were not selected via a lottery of proximity. They are not being kept around due to misplaced nostalgia. They are there because they passed. Because when the pressure mounted and others folded like paper, they stood rigid. They rented their space in your mind, not with smooth promises, but with undeniable receipts of their character. These individuals, these rare stoic lethal operators, are the battery pack of your ambition. They have no need for the spotlight. They require no ego stroking. They only require access to the mission. And once you grant that clearance, they utilize it to add bricks to your fortress, not to loosen the mortar. That utility is precisely what makes them formidable. It is what makes them priceless assets. Consequently, your operational mode changes. You broadcast less. You observe more. Every casual chat is now intelligence gathering. Every pause in conversation is a litmus test. Every emotional reaction is a signal flare. And every instance of treachery is a cut you only have to inflict once. It is a clean amputation without hesitation. There is no farewell tour, no dramatic exit interview, just a sudden void space absence and total detachment. Because the reality is simple, the ones who flunked the exam were temporary tourists. The ones who pass are permanent residents. They never leave. The more precise your standards become, the quieter your universe becomes. It is not empty. It is sterile and clean. It is not lonely. It is fortified. You stop mistaking high volume for high loyalty. You stop confusing mere attendance with genuine support. You begin to hunger for that stillness because in the silence, there is no acting, no performance art. You have no need to wear a bulletproof vest in your own living room. You don't need to decode or translate your thoughts. The people left standing speak your native tongue, not just your vocabulary, but your values. The great strategists understood that acquiring power is like lighting a beacon that attracts moths and deception. They knew that those who hover around influence will always wear disguises. Therefore, the wise sovereign must never allow their instincts to atrophy. Not in their judgment, not in their historical memory, and certainly not in the boundaries they enforce. You can offer forgiveness if it strategically solidifies your position, but you must never ever endure a lapse in memory. Because forgetting the nature of a snake is how you get bitten twice. Betrayal often returns simply wearing a better suit and a cleaner smile. While some stabs in the back are theatrical and obvious, most are subtle, a slow erosion, a compliment that lands wrong, a defense that comes a second too late, a door shut when it should have been propped open. True betrayal doesn't scream in your face, it whispers in your ear. And unless your senses are tuned to that frequency, unless you are truly listening, it will slip past your radar. That is why the loyalty audit isn't a one-time checklist. It is a permanent lifestyle. You stop trusting momentum and history. You start trusting current behavior patterns. You stop being dazzled by how much they admire you. Instead, you look for their capacity for endurance when the road gets rough. You stop asking people how they feel about you and start analyzing how they maneuver when you are no longer of use to them. Because real loyalty cannot be proven when the sun is shining. It is easy to be loyal to a king on the throne. Loyalty is revealed when you are vulnerable, when you have nothing to trade, when your public image is cracked, and your trajectory is shaky. That is the moment the costumes are dropped. That is when the opportunists evaporate into the mist. That is when the real ones step into the light. They don't do it with fanfare or speeches, but simply by remaining stationary. And the second you witness someone fail one of these stress tests, no matter how slight the fracture, do not doubt your eyes. Do not try to justify their failure with their past good deeds. Do not soften the blow with your own empathy. Accept the data and execute the cut. When you perceive that first hairline fracture in the foundation of a relationship, acknowledge it instantly. Do not let denial blind you. Sever the connection immediately before the fissure expands into an unbridgeable canyon. Niccolo Machiavelli grasped a harsh reality that most are too afraid to admit. The individuals who will stab you in the back with the most savage force are invariably the ones to whom you granted far too many reprieves. This is the precise juncture where the average person falters, they waver. They cling to a desperate, naive hope that the traitor might undergo a miraculous transformation, telling themselves that this instance is an anomaly or that the malice wasn't deliberate. However, you must internalize this absolute truth. Allegiance is never a matter of chance. No human being is faithful by mere coincidence. If they folded and betrayed you when the heat was on rest, assured they will replicate that treachery the moment the pressure returns. The only thing missing is the perfect scenario for them to turn on you. Therefore, the excision must be surgical and absolute. Offer no justifications, deliver no dramatic parting speeches, and issue no final ultimatums. When an individual flunks your test of character, they have already abandoned you emotionally long before the physical break. You are simply formalizing a departure that has already occurred. True dominion operates without screaming. Real mastery is quiet. The only sound that should resonate during these defining moments is the definitive cold click of a door locking them out of your life forever. After they have been purged, there is no space for mourning or nostalgia. You immediately pivot to reorganization and strategic recalibration. You advance instantly, unburdened, sharper, and with a cleaner operational environment. Do not mistake this rigorous vetting for paranoia. This is the fundamental architecture of sovereignty. It is about constructing an impenetrable empire that can withstand any siege. Whether that kingdom is a global enterprise or simply the sanctity of your own psyche, it is a fortress that must never be compromised by fragile alliances or counterfeit support systems. Each time you administer a loyalty test and witness a failure, you are not suffering a loss. You're acquiring an asset infinitely more precious than the false illusion of friendship they provided. You're gaining absolute certainty. You secure the knowledge that those standing with you have survived the crucible of fire. You confirm that your silence commands authority. You ensure your trajectory is no longer obstructed by dead weight and unnecessary clutter. This unshakable clarity transforms into your lethal competitive edge. While the masses waste their energy agonizing over hidden motives, second-guessing intentions, and putting out the fires of petty drama, you are free to maneuver, to strike, and to execute your vision flanked exclusively by a phalanx of the proven. Machiavelli never advocated for a life of total isolation where you trust not a single soul. His philosophy was far more sophisticated place. Your trust with extreme caution, select your circle strategically, and audit them ruthlessly. Invest your faith only in what has withstood repeated stress testing over years, not days. And when a bond survives that scrutiny, reciprocate fully, not with empty words, but with exclusive access and undying protection. In a world where treachery is the default setting, genuine allegiance is a rare diamond. When you unearth it, you must guard it and honor it like a master-crafted weapon forged specifically for your defense. After you have relentlessly audited every person in your orbit, and the dust of the conflict has finally settled, what you are left with is far more profound than simply a smaller contact list. You have ascended to a throne, a psychological vantage point of supreme command, from which you can operate with terrifying clarity and focus. The era of ambiguity is over. There is no more guesswork. You know exactly who is solid. You know exactly who crumbled. And most critically, you know the limitless power of your own discernment.